The story opens by introducing us to Kunon, a completely blind boy who startles his parents by asking what it truly means to see. Taken aback, they listen as Kuno explains that while everyone tells him his eyes cannot see, he doesn't even grasp the concept of sight itself. His mother looks on with concern, but his father steps in, explaining that seeing is the ability to perceive colors and shapes. However, since Kuno has no concept of either, he remains just as confused. His father reminds him that his eyes bear the hero's scar, a mark left by the holy knight Hector Juglia, and that it's something extraordinary to be proud of. With no other choice, Kuno resigns himself to his fate, though he can't help but wonder why the maids always pity him simply because he is blind. One day, this all begins to change when a maid named Iko guides him through the mansion to meet his new magic tutor. Kuno doesn't understand the point of studying magic, but Iko insists it would be a waste not to, as he was born with the rare water emblem, making the ability to use magic an incredible gift. Kuno retorts that even with magic he's still helpless, unable to go anywhere without someone's aid, questioning its real benefit. After a short walk, they finally meet Jenny Corse, who introduces herself as his magic tutor. Mere minutes into their first lesson, Kuno grips a magic wand and successfully casts a spell. Unsure of what he's just done, Jenny explains he cast Aori, a water spell that allows him to produce water from magic. She then mentions that the sphere of water he created is about the size of an eyeball, a comment that immediately captures his full attention. While Jenny panics, thinking she's offended the blind boy, and tries to backtrack by explaining it was just an analogy to help him understand, Kuno is completely lost in thought. He isn't offended, he's processing the very idea of an eyeball's size and what he has just manifested. A profound realization dawns on him. If he can create a sphere of water that size, perhaps he can create eyes for himself. Fueled by this newfound determination, Kuno decides he will forge his own eyes using magic. This resolve is immediately visible during lunch, where he begins to carefully feel his food, deconstructing his sandwich with his hands just to inspect what's inside. He had never given it a thought before, but now he can't help but feel an overwhelming curiosity about what's inside his sandwich. Everything is suddenly intriguing to him, and he wonders about the cool, grass-like thing in his mouth. Iko informs him it's called lettuce, and the tangy spread on the bread is a delicacy known as mustard. Kuno then picks up another item from his plate, assuming it's an apple, but Iko corrects him, explaining it's actually a plum. She notices his newfound inquisitiveness and comments on how rewarding it is to cook for him, as he's showing a genuine interest in different foods for the very first time. Kuno examines a strawberry, telling her that he's now fascinated by what he's eating, but he's being overwhelmed by too many different aromas at once. This is clearly because Iko prepared a feast for him, but she simply reiterates how fulfilling it was to cook. Later that day, a woman named Fiona joins Kuno to read him a book, just as they always do. To her surprise, Kuno specifically requests the story of the holy knight, Hector Juglia. Fiona is taken aback by his request, but reluctantly agrees after Iko reassures her. She asks Kuno to let her know if the story becomes too much for him, clearly showing her concern for his well-being. Kuno reassures her, stating that right now he has an insatiable thirst for all kinds of knowledge. The tale begins, explaining that long ago a great war raged between the world's heroes and the Demon King. This nation's hero, Hector Juglia, ultimately defeated the Demon King, but lost an arm and a leg in the ferocious battle. Ever since that war, descendants of the hero are occasionally born with something missing, an arm, a leg, or their sight. And given how long ago the battle was, one could even imagine that one of these descendants of Juglia might have been born without, well, a certain something. The people have come to call these children reincarnations of the hero, and their condition the hero's scar. However, Kuno sees himself as his own person, recognizing his magical power as something uniquely his, like a true narcissist. During his training, he successfully cast the Aori spell again, this time multiplying the water orbs by 4. Kuno is utterly determined, believing that by using his power, he can cast magic, and with his magic, he will finally create his own eyeballs. He is resolved to succeed at any cost,
But after pushing himself to cast this advanced spell, he is brutally reminded of reality when his body suddenly collapses from the strain. Once he recovers, he understands that he will need far more knowledge and stamina, as both are essential for powerful magic. Iko reminds him that he is still only 7 years old and doesn't eat very much, implying that he will certainly need to build his strength for the trials ahead.
Kuno, however, insists that waiting to grow stronger over time will be too late, declaring that fainting from basic magic is completely unacceptable. Iko explains that drastically increasing his food intake would make him sick, so they must do it in stages. Kuno agrees, adding that he also wants to strengthen his muscles to be like the great heroes, but admits he's not good at running or walking. Iko then suggests sword practice, and though Kuno initially objects, feeling it's not the path for a mage, she promises to find him a competent master. Before she leaves, Kuno stops her to thank her for everything, a gesture that makes Iko incredibly happy, though she cheekily replies that a nice pay raise would also be lovely. 2 days later, Kuno is training with his new swordsmanship tutor, who instructs him to focus on the muscles in his arms and shoulders, swinging the sword downward in a fluid motion from shoulder to elbow to wrist. Iko watches attentively until she spots Jenny arriving for the magic lesson and alerts Kuno. He pauses his training to greet his magic tutor, and as the swordsman departs, Jenny approaches, noting his new fencing practice. Kuno explains that he needs both knowledge and stamina to master magic. Jenny is slightly taken aback by how much he has changed in just a few days as she swaps his training sword for a wand. Deciding to review the Inori spell from their previous lesson, she doesn't expect much, but when Kuno effortlessly casts multiple spheres of water at the same time, she is left completely speechless. That's the look of a teacher who realizes her easy job is about to end. Jenny can't comprehend how he has advanced so much on his own after just one lesson, and honestly, she finds his potential truly terrifying. Elsewhere, Princess Marika is playing in her mansion when her handmaiden informs her that the carriage is ready. Marika questions if she really must go, prompting the maiden to ask if she despises the idea of visiting her fiancé so much. Marika muses that she's sure Kuno feels the same way, as he always appears so gloomy. The handmaiden reminds her that this is the king's decision, leaving Marika no choice but to comply. Inside the carriage, Marika's thoughts drift to Kuno, the boy born with the hero's scar and a person of great importance to the kingdom of Juglia. She understands that this political marriage is part of her royal duty, but she can't help but feel conflicted about it.
She recalls their first meeting, how she always tried to cheer him up, asking him what he liked and what games he wanted to play, like a girlfriend trying to fix a toxic relationship. However, Kuno's only response was always nothing, because he couldn't do anything or go anywhere on his own. Mirika's expression saddens at the memory, dreading the thought of having to see that gloomy face for the rest of her life. But to her astonishment, when she meets Kuno this time, he greets her with a radiant smile, more vibrant than she has ever seen him. Mirika is utterly speechless, and when she asks what happened, Kuno joyfully tells her he has fallen in love with magic. He decides to show her the Aori spell right then and there, creating a sphere of water and then taking it a step further by transforming it into a shimmering miniature rainbow just for her. Mirika is completely enchanted by the display, recognizing how truly impressive it is. Kuno then apologizes for making her feel like she had to walk on eggshells around him and asks if she would listen to his stories, as he's been doing many exciting things lately. Mirika looks at him amazed, never having known he could make such an expression. Without a moment's hesitation, she takes his hand and follows him, genuinely eager to hear his tales. At the end of the day, she returns home, her mind replaying how much fun she had with Kuno and wishing she could see him again soon. Meanwhile, Kuno also thinks of her after she leaves, remarking that he had never offered her his hand before. Iko tells him that's because he's a true gentleman, and Kuno suddenly feels a strong desire to learn how to properly conduct himself around America. With this new goal, he approaches Fiona, asking her to teach him to be a gentleman worthy of Princess Mirika. Fiona is delighted and agrees, telling him they will go over the composure and manners of a proper knight, but Iko interrupts, cheekily requesting that she also make him a knight with a sense of humor. Meanwhile, Jenny is in a state of utter confusion, wondering what to do after witnessing Kuno's magical capabilities. Creating 7 beautiful water spheres at the same time is something not even she can do, yet he has already completely mastered elemental magic. It seems he's learning far too quickly, and there's nothing left for her to teach him at this level. Still, Jenny considers moving on to intermediate magic, but immediately changes her mind. The other person in the room listens to her desperate ramblings and tells her to be quiet, which only makes her more flustered. Jenny tries to compose herself, muttering that this was supposed to be a quiet, well-paying job for a good long while, just teaching elemental magic to a child. While magic is convenient, it's not necessarily a path to greatness.
She reasons that it's still too early for a 7-year-old like Kuno to be learning advanced magic. Despite her doubts, Jenny suddenly grabs her pen and starts writing furiously, declaring that it's too soon to give up. The person next to her, clearly annoyed by the commotion, tells her to finally be quiet. Panicked, Jenny apologizes again but continues to write, vowing that she won't quit this job because she has bills to pay. The next time she sees Kuno, she enthusiastically tells him they'll be trying something different. Kuno, putting his new gentlemanly charm into practice, replies that he will gladly accept anything she proposes, especially when spoken in her beautiful voice. Jenny notices he's changed yet again, but brushes it aside and explains that the Iori spell he's been using simply creates water. So today, they are going to deconstruct the magic involved. Kuno immediately grasps the concept, asking if that means separating the elements of water production, levitation, and maintaining its spherical shape. Jenny praises his quick understanding and adds that they can break it down even further by considering variables like temperature, viscosity, composition, color, shape, luster, scent, and taste. She explains that there can be a vast variety of water and demonstrates by creating 2 water spheres. When Kuno touches each one, he immediately notes that one is cold and the other is hot. Jenny confirms this, explaining that magical alterations give character to magic, defining and differentiating each sorcerer and their unique talents. Kuno understands that by mastering this, he can alter the fine details of his magic. The next time he casts the Iori spell, he manages to create flavored water. Aiko tastes it and mentions it's like apple, but Kuno corrects her, stating it's actually plum. Jenny nearly faints, witnessing Kuno instantly master the magical alteration she had spent all night devising. She tries to stay composed, remarking that it seems he can do anything, but when he admits that it's actually quite difficult, she is taken by surprise, a glimmer of hope rekindling within her. However, that hope is quickly extinguished when Kuno promises that he will eventually master every single alteration. That night, he lies awake in bed, holding 2 apples and pondering how he can distinguish shapes and scents, but he doesn't know what colors are. Without that knowledge, he can't create the necessary magical alterations to craft his own eyeballs. He reaffirms his resolve to succeed because he wants to see everything in this world. The next morning, Aiko asks what he'd like to drink, and he requests milk tea without the milk, essentially asking for hot water. He then casts Iori to create a sphere of hot water himself, and Aiko can't hide her astonishment at his progress.
She remarks that magic is truly wonderful, especially from the perspective of someone without it, as it feels like a divine miracle. As Kuno moves the sphere of water, the moment it nears the apples on the table, he jolts up in shock. Aiko quickly catches the falling water with a teapot and asks him what's wrong, clearly concerned by his sudden reaction. After a moment of stunned silence, Kuno tells her he thinks he just saw something. Aiko immediately drops everything and asks if it's true, but Kuno struggles to explain, saying he doesn't know for sure and that technically he doesn't think he saw anything with his eyes. Aiko doesn't hesitate to pinch his cheeks, scolding that while she wanted him to be a gentleman with a sense of humor, she didn't want him to tell such tasteless jokes. Kuno tries to stop her, explaining that it felt as though he had seen colors, or rather felt them with his magic. Once she finally lets go, he picks up a green apple and asks if it's red. Aiko quickly calms down and tells him no, showing him a red one. Kuno then picks up the red apple and asks again, and Aiko gives him the correct answer, confirming that the colors and their names don't yet correspond for him because he's never seen them before. Kuno is clearly confused by this, so Aiko explains that there are idiomatic expressions involving colors. She then asks if he can tell how many apples are on the table. Kuno responds that he can distinguish 3 red apples and 2 green ones. Aiko immediately congratulates him for getting the right answer, exclaiming that this is truly like a divine miracle. Without wasting a moment, Aiko reports this development to his father, telling him that Kuno can now see colors. She clarifies that it's within a small range, but he seems to be able to recognize them now. The closer he is to an object, the clearer it is for him, and he can definitely distinguish the color when he touches them. Kuno's father is clearly shocked by the news and asks if this means he can now read books. Aiko confirms this, explaining that he can follow the ink to recognize the letters' colors, and though he hasn't learned the alphabet yet, he is already engrossed in picture books and encyclopedias. Once Kuno's father processes this incredible information, he asks Kuno's mother to return to the main house. She had moved out because Kuno didn't want to be a burden, and her husband had to attend to him tirelessly, but now that could all change. However, she informs him that Kuno is trying to change so drastically that every day is a struggle, and changing his environment now might hinder him from reaching his goals, so she doesn't think it's a good idea. Kuno's father quickly understands her logic and agrees she's right, adding that he's close enough to see him whenever he wants. He apologizes for putting her in the situation of caring for Kuno all by herself, but Aiko assures him that it's no trouble at all.
She says she loves working for money, and the more money, the better. Kuno's father smiles, remarking that her cheerful spirit might have a positive effect on his son. Seizing the opportunity, Ito says that more than a compliment, she'd love a raise, but Kuno's father just laughs, making his answer perfectly clear. Sometime later, Ito finds Kuno experimenting with his magic once again. He explains that Jenny will be arriving soon and he wants to surprise her. Ito encourages him to give it his all, so Kuno casts Ioti, creating an enormous red sphere of water above them. Ito praises him, saying it's a beautiful color, like the eyes of a white rabbit. Kuno is just as excited as she is, mentioning that when he makes the water spheres larger, he can perceive the color more intensely. He tries to focus on the color he's perceiving, but just then his parents and brother arrive. His mother tells him she heard the news and knows that he can now see colors. Kuno smiles and recognizes his voice immediately, knowing it's his dear mother. His sudden excitement causes him to lose focus, and the massive sphere of water he was holding in the air suddenly crashes down on top of him and Ito. After a moment of silence, Kuno completely ignores what just happened and continues talking to his mother despite being soaking wet. However, the deep red color of the water looks disturbingly like blood, and the terrifying sight makes his mother scream in horror. Before she can even process what she's seeing, she faints into her older son's arms. This time, Kuno's father isn't laughing. He is instantly filled with rage, demanding to know how Kuno could do something so horrible. Kuno doesn't understand what the problem is, so Ito helpfully explains that red is also the color of human blood. Kuno's mother manages to get back on her feet, but her husband is still furious. He tells Kuno that as punishment, he will have no allowance for 2 months, and Ito's salary will be reduced for 3. Kuno apologizes and accepts his punishment, but Ito immediately faints upon hearing the news of her pay cut. Meanwhile, Jenny observes the entire scene from a distance, confirming once again just how terrifying Kuno's potential is. It makes her wonder just how far he will go as he climbs the ranks of sorcery. For a moment, she thinks he might even be capable of obtaining the title of this world's greatest honor for a sorcerer, Cerulean. Sometime later, Kuno's father decides to speak with his firstborn son, Zio, telling him that he's thinking of sending Kuno to the school for noble children. He knows that since his birth, Kuno has barely left the mansion, and he worries he'll be afraid of strangers in the outside world.
But that's precisely why he's counting on Zio to be there for him. Zio hesitates for a moment, the memory of that one time he tried to play with his little brother flashing in his mind, the time Kuno tripped on the stairs and he let go of his hand. Despite the guilt that still haunts him, Zio looks at his father with determination and promises that he will do it. He will protect Kuno at any cost. Elsewhere, Kuno is calmly reading a book, tracing the words with his finger. Iko asks him what he's reading, and he explains it's about hydromancy, a divination technique where one can fill a supernaturally treated container with water to predict the future or find lost items. Iko gets instantly excited and asks if he can find her lost youth and faded sparkle. Kuno smoothly reassures her, telling her she is still young and in the prime of her life. Unfazed, Iko then asks if he can use hydromancy to find her future husband. Kuno replies that she is a wonderful woman, so men will undoubtedly flock to her, and playfully adds that if he weren't the second son of a marquis, he would take her as his wife. As they banter endlessly, Fiona simply watches with an awkward smile, wondering how they can be so cheerful. When their lessons begin, Kuno gives all the correct answers, but Fiona remains worried about him. She has tutored him on the manners of a noble gentleman, but Iko's idea of making him a knight with a sense of humor has left her doubting if she did the right thing. A cheerful man can be attractive, and it suits Kuno better, even if it might seem a bit shallow. Because of this, she still has reservations about what they've done. Kuno notices she's lost in thought and asks what's making her look so worried. Before she can answer, he decides to make a toast with his teacup, simply to admire her. This only confirms Fiona's suspicions that she is indeed quite shallow, but she has to admit, compared to when she first met him, he has become much more adorable. Kuno smells his tea and declares it a 12-year vintage from the New Kingdom, a brew worthy of such a beautiful woman. Iko corrects him, informing him it's actually a domestic blend from Julia, which only makes him laugh. Fiona simply observes their interactions with an uncomfortable smile, unsure of how to react. That night, Iko decides to guide Kuno back home, saying that Lord Gurion is waiting for him. A strong, cold wind makes her shiver on the way back, and she asks Kuno if he can do anything about it. So Kuno casts Iori, creating 2 spheres of warm water to keep them both comfortable.
Iko hugs one of the water spheres, enjoying how warm and soft it is, saying it feels incredibly nice to the touch. Kuno explains that he encapsulated the water with a super soft, elastic membrane, though it's still just a prototype. Iko remarks that she'd love a bed made out of that, and he admits he's been thinking the same thing, on the verge of inventing the water bed. Kuno then wonders what his father could possibly want to talk to him about, fearing he's done something wrong. Iko reassures him, saying she doesn't think he's done anything to warrant a scolding, as he's clearly learned his lesson after the Sea of Blood incident. When they finally arrive at the mansion, they are greeted by the butler, Valen, and Kuno's older brother, Zio. Zio walks with him through the house and asks if he needs him to guide him by the hand. Kuno reassures him, explaining that he's fine and can now perceive his surroundings quite well thanks to his magic. Zio quickly accepts this, but as he looks at Kuno, he can't help but remember the sad expression his little brother used to wear when he couldn't move around on his own. Kuno somehow senses his gaze and asks if something is wrong, but Zio simply smiles and says he's just glad his little brother is doing well. After a short walk, they finally meet with their parents, who have something important to discuss. Lord Gurion tells Kuno that Fiona informed him he has already finished the curriculum taught at the school for noble children, but she also mentioned that he isn't interested in attending the school itself. Kuno confirms this, saying he would hate to cause trouble for others and that there's something else he wants to prioritize over school. His father tells him he has always believed Kuno should do whatever his heart desires, but noble children are obligated to attend school. Officially, he is enrolled, but due to his special circumstances, they have received the king's permission to make his schooling optional. Kuno is silent for a moment before remarking that this smells a lot like nepotism. His father replies that he doesn't appreciate that phrasing and that it's beside the point, asking him to give it more thought. Kuno asks if he's referring to how he uses his allowance, as his father always complains about the way he spends it. He acknowledges that it might seem like a waste of money to his father, but he believes he uses it responsibly. His father tries to interject that he's not talking about his allowance, but Kuno continues, thanking him for always working so hard to provide for the family. His father asks him to drop the subject because he's making him look like he's being extorted.
Kuno then asks if he's still angry about him turning the garden into a sea of blood. At this, Gurion completely loses his composure and raises his voice, yelling that it was utterly unacceptable, and if it ever happens again, he'll have no allowance for 6 months. His wife tries to calm him down, reminding him that's not what they're here to discuss today. Once he's finally settled, Gurion clarifies that he's only asking Kuno to think about Princess Mirika. After all, nobles who don't fulfill their obligations are put at a disadvantage in high society. This means that because of him, Mirika could be viewed negatively in the future. Kuno understands the situation immediately, and that's all he needs to hear to agree. He tells his father he will go to school, even if it seems like a bother.
Gurion clarifies that he's not asking him to go for years, he just needs to take the advancement exams. Once he passes them, he will receive an official graduation certificate, and since there are only 5 exams, he will only have to go to the school 5 times. Kuno is relieved to hear it's that simple. Zio adds that he and Mirika will be graduating after the next exam, so Kuno will be taking it with them. Without wasting any time, Kuno's mother says they must get him ready for school, as he'll need new clothes, shoes, and a proper coat. She needs to take his measurements and asks Aiko for help. After they leave to take care of that, Gurion warns Zio that other royals attend the school and might try to get close to Kuno and Mirika. Zio reassures him, promising he'll be with them to prevent any trouble. Later, when Kuno informs Mirika that he'll be attending school, she is clearly overjoyed at the news. He clarifies that he'll only be there for the advancement exams, but she still thinks it's wonderful because it means she'll get to spend time with him at school. Kuno confesses he's not sure what to expect, but Mirika reassures him, saying that she'll accompany him as his senior. Kuno accepts her offer, but also mentions he's worried that if she's always with him, all the boys who have a crush on her will get jealous. Mirika nervously tells him she's sure everything will be fine, prompting Kuno to ask if she isn't popular. This clearly offends her, and she reminds him that she's a princess, so of course she's popular. She has as many boys who like her as she has fingers on her right hand. Therefore, he should be grateful to be with her. Since that's only 5 boys, Kuno starts thinking about getting a new staff for self-defense, just in case he has to pull a Scott Pilgrim. When the day finally arrives, Kuno is dressed in a smart new outfit.
Wearing an elegant mask to cover his eyes and carrying a new staff, Aiko is completely thrilled with his new look, gushing that he looks just like a prince from a classic fairy tale. Kuno plays along with his practiced charm, which makes Zio wonder if his little brother was always this shallow. Once they're in the carriage, Kuno bids farewell to his family and casts Aori to evenly coat the wheels with water. As the carriage starts to move, Zio is surprised to find that it's not shaking at all. Kuno explains that a bumpy ride is bad for the back, so he used Aori to create a smoother journey. Zio remarks that magic is truly convenient, and Kuno agrees, adding that because it's so versatile, even he might be able to find a job in the future. After a while, Zio says he's sure Kuno must be nervous about traveling so far from home, but Kuno disagrees, telling him he's become a little stronger now. He also knows that Zio has worried a lot about him, especially since he blamed himself for a long time after Kuno fell and got hurt. Zio is a bit surprised that Kuno knew, but Kuno reassures him that he's fine now. He admits that he used to wish he could just disappear, but now he's determined to survive no matter what. Zio can't help but smile at this, realizing how much his little brother has truly changed since learning magic. Kuno adds that he has an overwhelming drive to prevail, even if the rest of the world perishes, so he will live on. This statement takes Zio by surprise, leaving him quite confused, but Kuno continues, saying he will live so long that he'll feel sorry for the entire human race. Hearing this, Zio just nods and smiles uncomfortably, wondering if this is really his brother. Shaking off the strange thought, he is surprised again when Kuno perceives that they are almost at the school, which means he can sense a massive number of people. When they finally arrive, Mirika runs over to greet them, and Kuno doesn't hesitate to turn on the charm. Zio simply watches their interaction in silence, wondering what's going on with those two. Mirika decides it's time to go, but grows concerned when Kuno doesn't follow her. Kuno remains rooted to the spot, concentrating on the many voices he's hearing all at once. The presence of countless people and their endless chatter is overwhelming, and he knows his past self would have cowered at this. However, he simply smiles and extends his hand to Mirika, asking if she can be his guide for now. Mirika plays along without question, taking his hand and saying that in that case, she'll be his knight. Zio decides not to ask any questions, but he's definitely very confused by all of this. Meanwhile, Kaz, a teacher at the school, seems to be awaiting Kuno's arrival. She is also clearly worried, as this is the second son of the Marquis, the one with the hero's scar. Rumors have spread that he's a timid boy, and she can't help but worry, wondering if a novice teacher like herself can handle the task of guiding him. Her thoughts are interrupted when she overhears some girls talking about a boy as charming as a prince. That's when she sees Kuno for the first time, escorted by Mirika and his older brother. As they walk past her, she quickly reacts and calls out his name, stopping him before he gets away. Kaz introduces herself as a teacher at the school and explains that she will be his guide for the day.
Kuno decides to introduce himself properly, but confuses her when he says that right now he's a girl. Kaz is completely lost, so Kuno clarifies that he's biologically a boy with a boy's personality, but he thinks today is a beautiful day. This statement doesn't help her understand at all, but before she can ask anything else, the bell rings and Mirika and Zio have to leave. Kaz bids them farewell with a smile, but once she's alone with Kuno, she gets the feeling this is going to be a lot of work. As Mirika says goodbye to Kuno, a group of students watches from a classroom, commenting that he's the one with the hero's scar. One of them notes that the House of Gurion received the king's blessings for having the first hero's scar born in 100 years. Prince Lyle scowls as soon as he hears this, so his companions quickly try to backtrack, saying Kuno doesn't look like much and that the hero's scar might just be an unfounded superstition. But despite their attempts to suck up and fix the situation, when Lyle sees Mirika smiling at Kuno, he is clearly more enraged than before. Shortly after, Kaz leads Kuno to a classroom and asks if he's heard the summary of the advancement exams. Kuno confirms, stating that if he passes 5 exams, he can receive his graduation certificate. Kaz explains that normally there's a period of time to prepare for the next exam after taking one, but as an exception, his exams will be held over a shorter period, as she has received orders from his father and the king to do so. Kuno stops her and with a serious expression tells her that his father and the king are very close friends, so this is clearly nepotism, and he wants to apologize for the school being pressured into doing this. Kaz clearly wasn't expecting that, so she just says she'll pretend she didn't hear anything. However, Kuno continues, saying he's heard that these things happen all the time in high society. Kaz says nothing and places the exam sheets on his desk, telling him he's free to let her know when he's ready.
Kuno continues, saying that his father and the king are thick as thieves. Kaz nervously tries to ignore his comments and asks him not to involve her in a political mess. Kuno keeps insisting, explaining that the relationship goes back to the previous generation, but Kaz immediately cuts him off and tells him to start the exam. Later, Kaz joins the other teachers to review his answers. She never expected Kuno to be chatting throughout the entire exam and was sure he would fail because of it. But to her astonishment, he got everything right in every subject, which makes absolutely no sense to her. Meanwhile, Kuno starts to feel hungry, so he decides to head to the cafeteria with Mirika. However, they suddenly run into Prince Lyle and his companions, and Mirika almost instantly shrinks in place. Everyone nearby falls silent, and the atmosphere quickly fills with tension, making Kuno wonder what's going on. Lyle scoffs at Kuno, asking if a brat like him really received his father's blessings. Mirika tries to defend Kuno from her older brother, but Lyle tells her to stay out of it. Kuno grips his staff tightly and tells Lyle he doesn't care who he is, but if he bothers Mirika and gets in his way, he won't be able to ignore it. His threat is suddenly interrupted by Zio, who steps between them and nervously asks Lyle if he wants something with his little brother. Lyle is clearly not happy with the intervention and complains about how disrespectful Zio is, as he hasn't given him permission to speak. Zio hesitates nervously, unable to believe that his little brother and Mirika were accosted by royalty on their very first day. He doesn't understand anything and clearly doesn't know what to do, but Kuno decides to act first. He silently casts Iori, and with his magic, he gathers all the water he can find in the cafeteria without anyone noticing. He then uses it to soak Lyle's pants. Zio nervously reminds Lyle that at school, status is not supposed to matter, so they should just smooth things over. Lyle clearly disagrees, but Kuno interrupts them, announcing that the little prince has wet himself. Only then does Lyle look down and see his soaked trousers. Everyone starts to murmur. Lyle is instantly embarrassed and tries to deny it, not understanding what just happened. On the other hand, Zio already has an idea of what occurred and knows Kuno is involved. Feeling exposed and humiliated, Lyle decides to run off and his companions follow him. Kuno simply smiles victoriously, saying that now there are no more nuisances. He easily brushes the matter aside to talk about what he's going to eat for lunch, mentioning that he's craving a hamburger. Zio immediately stops him to address the obvious problem, asking if he was the one who did that to the prince.
Kuno completely ignores the question with a smile and asks Mirika what she's going to eat. Zio knows it's better not to question him, so he decides to just sit down and have lunch with them. Once they finally have their food, Kuno asks about Leal, and Mirika informs him that he's her brother, the 6th prince of Juglia. Kuno is shocked to learn they are siblings, as he thought it was impossible for an older brother not to cherish his younger siblings. Mirika tells him she wishes that were true, but clearly it's not, and Zio confirms it. Kuno then tells Zio he's glad that he is his older brother, and once again, Zio realizes just how much his little brother has truly changed. However, he also recognizes that they acted very recklessly towards someone so untouchable, and he has no idea how he's going to report this to their father. Kuno simply enjoys his meal, not a care in the world, so Mirika laughs and tells Zio that overthinking it won't change anything. Her attempt to reassure him does little to ease Zio's worries, so he can only hope they can graduate without any further incidents.
Everyone in school has to act scared of Prince Lyle's power, but this just annoys him, and he even silences a teacher who tries to correct him, leaving the professor sighing in defeat. In the dining hall, Kunon wants to know more about the obnoxious prince and why he's so aggressive. Marika explains the real reason is herself. Initially, Lyle was the 6th prince, while she was the 9th princess, making her vastly inferior in status. However, after becoming engaged to Kunon, the bearer of the hero's scar, her social standing rose dramatically. Now that Kunon has made his official debut in high society, their combined status will only continue to climb, which is why Lyle is so angry with them. After the incident, Kunon wants to apologize to the prince, but his brother and Marika forbid it. The next day, Kunon continues practicing his water magic for Genie, with the goal of changing the properties of water. He succeeds in creating ice by lowering the water's temperature to its absolute minimum. Told to touch various things to understand their feel, he curiously touches a horse, much to Iko's confusion. Marika still runs out to greet him on what will be his final day of exams at the school. Seizing the opportunity, Kunon lays on the charm with flowery words, saying things like his world would collapse if he couldn't hear her voice, which the blonde princess loves to hear, even as her brother cringes at the cheesiness. For the final test, Genie requires him to work with the other students. Kunon is initially excited, but then feigns sadness that he won't be alone with his teacher anymore. While taking the test, he casually asks about Genie's personal life, like why she became a teacher, and surprisingly, she tells him everything. Soon after, his classmates approach, wanting to get to know the princess's fiancé. Seeing their sincerity, Kunon confidently introduces himself, showing off the gentlemanly charm he's been taught at home, and feels a sense of relief as he easily connects with them. He's relieved to know his fiancée, Marika, and her brother have friends, as he had mistakenly thought they were lonely. In reality, Marika had asked everyone to give them space so Kunon could enjoy his rare school experience without being treated like an outcast. Understanding this, Kunon immediately turns to flirt with the princess right in front of their new friends, but his over-the-top compliments quickly make everyone else feel awkward. Just as the exam is about to start, Prince Lyle's group is still lingering outside, with his friends urging him to hurry into class before they get into trouble. The bell rings, and as Marika prepares to sit, Lyle approaches, clearly looking to start something, which makes the entire class nervous. Whispers fill the room, even among the maids, about how Lyle's terrible attitude couldn't be fixed even by royal training. These very comments are what wound the prince, causing him to put up a tough facade to hide his deep-seated loneliness. Just as Lyle is stewing in his anger towards everyone, Kunon suddenly grabs his hand, cheerfully introducing himself as the princess's fiancé. The entire room is stunned by this bold move. While Kunon happily explains he didn't get a proper chance to greet him before, a shocked Lyle tries desperately to pull away, but our hero holds on tight, even calling him his future brother-in-law. This overwhelming friendliness completely disarms Lyle, melting his anger away. Though blind, Kunon's sense of touch is incredibly sharp, and after feeling Lyle's hand, he assesses that the prince feels very masculine and must be handsome, admitting he'd probably stare if he could see. Unexpectedly complimented by another guy, Lyle can't help but feel pleased, but he still has to ask his sister to pull this annoying weirdo off him.
Seeing her brother flustered for the first time, Marika bursts out laughing, followed by the entire class. The embarrassed prince finally relents and begs Kunon to let go, an incident that is sure to become the talk of the school. Iko, who had initially feared a fight, is relieved to see they've somehow become friends. Later that afternoon, the exam results are posted. Jeannie draws a flower and congratulates them all on successfully passing their graduation exam.
The happy couple celebrates their success, and Kunon thanks everyone for the wonderful time, having won over his new friends despite his eccentricities. Even Prince Lyle can't help but smile as he reconsiders his opinion of the boy. A few days later, Genie continues Kunon's training, only to find his control over water magic has reached absolute perfection. He can effortlessly accomplish any task she sets, from splitting a water sphere and changing its color to altering its very texture. He then takes it a step further, creating a stunningly lifelike bird out of water, a feat so advanced that Genie collapses in shock, realizing she has absolutely nothing left to teach him. During tea, she tries to bring this up, but Kunon misunderstands, thinking she wants an invitation to his graduation party. When she insists on revealing a secret, he playfully pushes Iliko aside to listen, joking about whether Genie is a goddess of the night sky about to return to her divine realm. With a sad smile, Genie confesses the truth. She ran out of things to teach him long ago. He's simply too brilliant and learns too fast, and she believes he will soon surpass her in every way. Kunon refuses to accept this, insisting he loves the magic tricks she devises to fool him, which in reality were lessons Genie created out of desperation. He explains that her tricks were what helped him expand the scope of his magic, gave him confidence, and provided him with a purpose in life. Genie can't help but laugh, unsure whether to be insulted or flattered that he calls her incredibly useful, hard-won techniques mere tricks, especially since she had to rack her brain and test them countless times just to keep up with his genius. Kunon mistakenly assumes Genie is quitting over her salary and immediately offers to ask his father for a raise and a bonus for her, but Genie quickly corrects him, explaining that she feels guilty accepting such a high salary when she has nothing left to teach. She insists he has reached his limit with her and must find a more distinguished mage, as she can no longer help him progress. A saddened Kunon insists that her useful little tricks are brilliant and begs her to stay, even if she has to keep tricking him, but she gently refuses. As she leaves, Genie reflects on Kunon's genius, acknowledging he's destined to become an Azure Sorcerer, which renews her own motivation to improve, vowing not to be completely outshone by her former student. The next day, Iko delivers more bad news, announcing that she too will be resigning soon, explaining that with Kunon having graduated and becoming more self-sufficient, it's time for her to start her own family. She cheekily asks him to help find her replacement, a handsome male servant between 18 and 25. Hearing this, a petty Kunon immediately decides to scrap the handsome requirement, hoping it will make her less eager to leave. That evening, the family struggles with finding a new tutor. His brother suggests the legendary royal archmage Geo, but his father forbids it, explaining that a royal archmage only takes direct orders from the king, and it's nearly impossible to hire one. When Kunon naively suggests his father can just ask, since he's friends with the king, a simplistic view his father correctly blames on Iko, his ideas are shot down. However, after seeing his mother's pleading face, his father relents and agrees to try. Soon, word reaches the royal court, where Mirika's older sister speaks highly in his favor, and upon learning that the prospective student is the bearer of the hero's scar, the royal archmage is left utterly astonished.
A few days later, Kunon and his father were summoned to the royal palace, and our protagonist was incredibly excited for another private meeting with a royal sorcerer, while his father hoped that if things went well, they might even secure a magic tutor. Before the meeting, his father checked on his progress, and Kunon demonstrated his skill by creating a cat out of water, which, unlike before, now had color. His father adored the creature and remarked on how convenient magic was, while Kunon mused that with more research, he could make it move more naturally and perhaps even meow. Seeing his father's fondness, Kunon asked why he didn't get a real cat, but his father explained he'd never get any work done. Their family had a no-pets rule to prevent dangerous accidents, and most importantly, his mother was a dog person who strongly disliked cats. Understanding, Kunon then asked about the noble practice of keeping a cat outside, a euphemism for having a mistress that his maid, Aiko, had taught him about. His father, silently cursing the maid for teaching his son such nonsense, chuckled and admitted he didn't have the guts for that anyway. Soon after, they met Mitika's older sister, Reza, the second princess. After his father's reminder to greet her properly, Kunon cheekily called her his future sister-in-law. Reza, who had heard much about him from Mitika, was fascinated by his water cat right before he turned it back into a liquid, much to his father's disappointment. She then explained she would take Kunon to the Black Tower for official business, while his father had tea with His Majesty. Kunon assured his father he could get home alone, slyly revealing he had a dinner date with Mitika at the very same restaurant where his father had won over his mother. Inside the castle, Kunon barraged Reza, herself a royal sorcerer, with so many magic-related questions that she got a headache and told him to tone it down. She then explained her own position among the 7 princes and 10 princesses of the Huglia royal family, noting that while a prince would normally be chosen for succession, their kingdom valued actual ability above all else.
Suddenly, as they neared the Black Tower, Kunon sensed the overwhelming presence of numerous powerful magic users, realizing that the title of Royal Sorcerer was far from just an honorific. To speed things up, he transformed the water at his feet into a slick path of ice and began to glide, a trick that delighted his future sister-in-law Reza. Amidst the fun, she delivered a crucial warning, urging him not to join any of the successor factions in the royal court, not to let them get any leverage on him, and to avoid signing any documents. With the serious business concluded, she eagerly asked to join in, and Kunon happily obliged, creating a thin layer of ice on her shoes so she could slide alongside him. The two of them caused a joyful commotion throughout the palace, easily outskating the guards who tried to stop them until they were finally caught by the stern Captain Dario and forced to apologize. Meanwhile, his father, enjoying tea elsewhere, comically spat out his drink upon hearing reports of a mischievous young sorcerer causing a scene. Afterwards, Kunon was brought before Rondaman, the chief of the royal sorcerers, whose introduction was accompanied by such an immense pressure that it made Kunon break out in a cold sweat. If Reza's mana was astonishing, this man's was on a completely different, terrifying level. They discussed the water seal on Kunon's shoulder, with Rondaman explaining that sorcerers possess seals representing one of 7 elements, divided into 5 ranks. Kunon was currently a rank 2 water user, just as Mirika was a rank 2 wind user. Sensing the chief's immense power, Kunon guessed he was rank 3, only to be corrected that he was actually rank 4. Rondaman explained that while they could sense total mana, true development depended entirely on what a sorcerer chooses to learn and the effort they put in. To Kunon's surprise, the intimidating chief then revealed a fun-loving side, inviting him to demonstrate his unique magic for the other sorcerers. As Reza enthusiastically vouched for his incredible talent, the others grew curious, while Kunon hoped that passing this impromptu test would finally secure him a proper mentor. The one chosen to test him was Victor, another powerful water user who could skillfully manipulate numerous spheres of water at once.
Kunon's task was to use his own abilities to seize control of the water spheres from Victor, a concept that astonished him as he'd never considered magic could be used to steal another sorcerer's spell. His lessons had only covered manipulating existing water or creating it himself, but this opened up the incredible possibility of commandeering magic cast by someone else. Instantly thrilled, Kunon focused his power, but facing such direct magical resistance for the first time was a struggle. Victor's control was immense. Gritting his teeth, Kunon forcefully wrestled with the spell until the chief called a halt to the intense battle. Though Kunon was berating himself for only capturing 2 spheres, everyone else was astounded by his talent, with Victor admitting he never expected the boy to steal even a single one. This prompted Victor to ask to be Kunon's mentor, but the other sorcerers loudly objected, all wanting the prodigy for themselves.
Reza playfully jabbed that Victor wasn't qualified since his girlfriend had just dumped him, with others chiming in that he couldn't manage his own life, let alone a student's. Amidst the cheerful chaos, Kunon was surprised to see the seemingly stern chief was the most fun-loving of all, eagerly asking to bounce on one of Kunon's super soft water spheres, a creation encased in an elastic membrane that Kunon boasted would make a perfect bed. At their urging, he also created a water clone of his maid, Eco, which, despite its limited movement, could fly, though its translucent, ghost-like appearance was unsettling. Naturally, they made him try it anyway, resulting in a palace-wide panic that earned the all a scolding. Afterwards, the chief officially agreed to be Kunon's instructor, and when asked about his ultimate goal, Kunon declared, "I want to create eyes with magic," earning looks of awe from everyone. His father, however, was less amused, having heard bad news about his son twice during tea, and delivered a stern lecture to both him and Reza on the responsibility of their power, forbidding Kunon from using magic that could cause harm, and reminding him to be accountable for his actions. Yet, just moments later, that lecture was forgotten as Reza proposed a special method to get Kunon to his date, combining her wind magic with his water cushion to shoot them through the sky at high speed. Their reckless flight ended with a crash landing at Mitika's residence, earning them a third scolding for the day's dangerous antics, while upstairs, a blissfully unaware Mitika was trying on a beautiful dress, wondering if Kunon would like the color.